Asira stared at the locked office door, holding the cardboard box that carried her life's work. She wasn't angry, not yet, just hollow. Behind the glass, Gashu was laughing, not even pretending to hide it. That laugh she would never forget, and it would be the sound that fueled everything that came next. Asira had given 5 full years of her life to that company. She came early, stayed late, helped others, and always said yes when the team needed her. She wasn't just an employee. She was the quiet engine behind many of the company's biggest wins. But one morning, everything changed. The HR head called her into a meeting. No smile, no warmth, just a cold paper and 2 words. You're done. They said it was a cost-cutting decision. Nothing personal, just business. But it felt personal, very personal. Asira walked out with a small box in her hands. Inside it were her notebooks, her favorite pen, and a picture of her late mentor who once told her, "They may not see you now, but one day they will remember your name." Asira tried to stay calm, but her eyes were wet. Her heart felt heavy. She was walking past her old desk when she heard it. Laughter. Loud, sharp laughter. It wasn't just anyone. It was Gashu, her ex. The man she had once trusted. The one who knew how much this job meant to her. He was standing with a group of junior staff, mocking her. He didn't even try to hide it. Tears over a desk. "Come on, be serious," he said, loud enough for the entire floor to hear. Some chuckled, others looked away, uncomfortable, but Gashu smirked, proud of his words. Asira stood frozen for a moment, staring at him. That laugh, that voice, it burned into her. Not because of the breakup, not because she lost her job, but because he chose to humiliate her when she was already at her lowest. She didn't scream, she didn't reply, she just nodded slowly and turned away. But something inside her shifted. The silence she carried all these years, the quiet way she let people overlook her, it broke. That moment, that public laugh, became a match. And inside her, a fire started. Not a fire of revenge, a fire of purpose. Gashu thought he had won, that he had reduced her to nothing with a joke. But what he didn't know was, Asira wasn't going to stay down. She was going to rise, quietly, powerfully, and one day he would remember that laugh and regret ever making it. Asira didn't know where to go after losing her job. Her heart was heavy, her mind full of questions. She walked the quiet streets until her feet led her to the one place that always gave her peace, the cemetery where her mentor, Mr. Aduke, was buried. He had passed away 2 years ago, but his words still lived inside her. He was more than just a boss. He had believed in her when no one else did. She sat beside his grave, tears silently falling. "I don't know what to do anymore," she whispered. The wind moved softly through the trees, and for a moment she felt like he was listening. As she stood to leave, she noticed a small metal box placed carefully behind the headstone. Curious, she picked it up. Her name was written on it in Mr. Aduke's handwriting. Her hands shook a little as she opened the box. Inside was a sealed envelope and a folded piece of paper with one short line. "If they push you out, stand taller." Asira stared at the words. It felt like he had written them just for this very moment. With trembling fingers, she opened the envelope. Inside was a legal document. At first, she didn't understand what she was looking at. Then it hit her. It was the ownership papers of a small company. One Mr. Aduke had quietly registered years ago, but never launched. Her name was listed as the sole heir. He had left it all to her. Asira's heart pounded. She couldn't believe it. A whole company, a chance, a door she didn't even know existed had just opened. In that moment, everything changed. She looked at the name of the company. It wasn't fancy, just simple initials. But to her, it was a seed, a way out of the pain, a way to start again, on her own terms. Asira sat there for a long time, holding the papers close to her chest. She smiled through her tears. Mr. Aduke had seen something in her, and even after his death, he was guiding her. She stood up with a new feeling in her chest. Not anger, not sadness, but quiet strength. Maybe life had pushed her out, but now she was going to stand taller, because behind her fall, there was always a map, and she had just found it. Asira didn't rush. She took her time. She studied the papers her mentor left behind, learned every corner of the company he had quietly registered, and thought deeply about what it could become. Then, with quiet strength, she gave it a new name, Root Rise. She chose that name for a reason, because roots grow deep in the dark before they ever break the surface. just like her, just like the people she planned to bring on board. She didn't go after big names or shiny resumes. Instead, she looked for people like her, the ones who had been ignored, laughed at, or told they weren't enough. She found a young coder who was rejected by 3 companies because of his stutter, a single mom who left tech to raise her kids, but still built apps in her kitchen, a designer who never got hired because he dressed different. One by one, she brought them in. No fancy offices, no big talks, just a small team, hungry to prove the world wrong. They met in cafes, in tiny rented rooms, sometimes even online when they couldn't afford space. But they had something no other company had: belief in each other. Asira worked in silence. She never told anyone she owned the company. She signed emails as operations head and let the team shine. She wanted the focus to stay on the work, not on her story. And the work? It was magic. In just a few months, Rootrise launched its first product, a smart, simple platform that solved real problems. It wasn't loud, it wasn't flashy, but it worked better than anything else in the market. People started noticing. Suddenly, tech blogs were asking, who is behind Rootrise? Big companies tried to copy their features. Investors called, offering meetings. Competitors were losing clients. And all this time, Asira stayed quiet. She watched from behind the scenes, her heart full, not with revenge, but with pride. The same world that laughed when she cried was now watching, confused, as something powerful rose from the ground they once kicked her into. Rootrise wasn't just a company, it was a storm. And Asira, she was its quiet thunder, waiting, because sometimes the strongest storms don't shout. They build in silence, then shake the world. Asira was going through her usual routine, studying rival companies, learning their patterns, and watching how they moved. She liked to stay ahead, quietly. One evening, while scanning through a list of employees at Gashu's firm, a name caught her eye: Nare. It had been years, but Asira remembered her well. Nare was Gashu's ex-girlfriend. Back in the day, she was always soft-spoken, thoughtful, and very smart, but always pushed into the background. People never really saw her, not even Gashu, who treated her like a shadow, not a partner. Asira clicked on her profile: junior analyst. Still overlooked, but Asira could see what others didn't. Nare's reports were solid. Her ideas were sharp. It was clear she was doing more than her role, but getting none of the credit. That feeling hit home. Asira knew exactly how that felt. She didn't want to scare Nare away or bring up the past, so she reached out using a different name. No titles, no drama, just a simple message: I've seen your work. I think you deserve more. At first, Nare didn't respond. Maybe she was used to being ignored. Maybe she didn't believe it. But after a few days, she replied. Who are you? Asira just said, someone who sees what others don't. They started talking. Asira asked about her goals, her ideas, her vision. And Nare opened up slowly. She had dreams, plans, things she had been waiting to share, but no one ever listened. Then Asira offered her a job at Rootrise. Not just any job, a role where her ideas would matter, where her voice would count, where no one would silence her, or laugh at her, or use her work without giving her credit. Nare was shocked. She said, why me? Asira answered, because I've been you. Nare didn't know who was behind the company yet. She didn't know the full story, but something inside her said yes. Not for money, not for title, but for the first time in her life someone had seen her. Not as Gashu's ex, not as a quiet girl in the corner, but as a real force. Asira smiled quietly as she welcomed her to the team, because this wasn't about the past. It was about lifting the people the world forgot. Rootrise wasn't just rising from the ground. It was rising with people like Nare, people who just needed someone to believe. After months of quiet work, Rootrise was finally ready. Asira and her small team had built something powerful, a smart, simple platform that helped businesses save time and money. It didn't have a big flashy name, but it worked better than anything out there. And now it was live. The first few days were quiet, but then the news started spreading. Small businesses were switching over. They were saying the new platform was faster, easier, and more affordable. Rootrise didn't even advertise much. It grew through whispers, shared links, and good results. Gashu's firm noticed the change. At first, Gashu just laughed. He told his team, it's nothing, probably just a cheap side project. He made jokes about how anyone with a laptop could make an app these days. He didn't even try to look into it seriously. But his team wasn't laughing. They had started seeing the numbers. Clients were leaving, not all at once, but enough to raise eyebrows. His junior staff began talking about root rise in hushed voices, curious and a little worried. Then something unexpected happened. One of his lead developers resigned, then another and another. Gashu was shocked. Why would they leave for a no-name startup? He asked. But the truth was, they weren't just leaving for money. They were leaving for meaning. They were leaving for a place where their ideas mattered, where they could grow, where they didn't have to fight just to be heard. One of them even said, "Root rise is doing what you promised, but never delivered." Investors started calling. What is this root rise? Why are we losing market share? Why are your best talents leaving? Gashu couldn't answer. His smirk, once so confident, started to fade. He tried to act like he had it under control, but behind closed doors, he was frustrated. He didn't understand how something so quiet, so simple, was pulling the ground from under him. But Asira knew. She had planted those roots deep, and now the ripples were rising to the surface. It wasn't just about the product. It was about building something that made people feel seen, respected, and free to create. And Gashu, he was finally feeling what Asira once felt, powerless. And he didn't even know this was just the beginning. The annual tech gala was the biggest event of the year. Business owners, investors, innovators, all gathered under one roof, dressed in their best, ready to show off success and shake hands with power. Gashu was there too, proud as ever, smiling for cameras, pretending nothing was falling apart behind the scenes. But the real surprise hadn't walked in yet. Then the doors opened, and in walked Asira. It was the first time she appeared publicly as the CEO of Rootrise. No one had seen her face in the media before. She had stayed behind the scenes, letting the work speak. But tonight, she was done hiding. She wore a simple black dress, the same one Gashu had once laughed at when they were together. He had called it too plain, too boring, not impressive enough. But tonight, that same dress made the entire room stop and stare. She walked in with quiet confidence. No need for a loud entrance. Her name was already on the guest list, and now it was in every conversation. People rushed to her side. Big names, famous investors, influential tech leaders. They all wanted to shake her hand, ask her about Root Rise, know what her next move was. She smiled politely, answered with grace, but kept her power calm. She didn't need to prove anything. Her presence said it all. And then Gashu saw her. At first, he didn't even recognize her. But when he did, his smile faded just a little. He stared across the room, stunned. The same woman he had mocked was now the one every powerful person wanted to speak to. Slowly, he made his way over. "Asira," he said, trying to act casual. "Didn't expect to see you here." She turned to him with a calm smile. "Oh, I'm sure you didn't." He laughed nervously. "You look different." She nodded. "I feel different." There was a pause. Gashu looked around. "So, you're the face behind Root Rise?" Asira looked him directly in the eye. Yes. She didn't brag. She didn't gloat. But in that one word, there was power. In that one moment, his entire mask slipped. He wasn't the one in control anymore. She was, and everyone could see it. The room didn't revolve around Gashu that night. It revolved around her, the quiet storm who rose from the dust, wearing the same basic dress he once mocked, now shining brighter than anyone else. He had laughed at her before, but now the laugh was gone, and Asira, she was just getting started. The gala lights sparkled above, and music floated softly through the air. Asira was standing near the large glass window, speaking with a group of top investors. Her calm smile, her graceful words, everything about her showed confidence. She had grown, not just in business, but in presence. People respected her, listened to her, admired her. Then came Gashu. He had been watching from across the room, unsure, nervous. The same man who once laughed at her pain was now forcing a smile, trying to gather courage. He finally walked up to her, pretending like they were strangers meeting for the first time. He stretched out his hand and said, "Hi, I'm Gashu. Do I know you?" Asira turned slowly. Her eyes met his. She could see he was pretending. He knew who she was. Everyone knew by now. But he was trying to act casual, as if the past had disappeared. Maybe he hoped to reset the story. Maybe he thought she'd play along. But Asira didn't need to play. She smiled softly, the kind of smile that carried both memory and power. "Yes," she said clearly, her voice steady. You know me? He hesitated. Oh? From where exactly? Her eyes didn't blink. Her tone didn't change. I remember you perfectly, she said. You taught me everything I didn't want to be. For a second, the air stood still. People nearby paused their conversations. The room seemed to quiet down as those words hung in the air. Gashu's face changed. The smile faded. He didn't know what to say next. Asira didn't raise her voice. She didn't need to. Her truth was loud enough. She didn't bring up the day he laughed at her tears. She didn't mention how he mocked her dress or doubted her worth. She didn't need to list his wrongs, because her success, her calm power, was already the answer to all of it. People around them looked on in silence, some in shock, some in admiration. Gashu looked down, then quickly turned and walked away. Asira didn't follow him. She turned back to her guests, took a sip of her drink, and smiled. The moment was over, but the message was clear. She hadn't forgotten. She had simply risen, and now the woman who once walked out of that office in tears was the one everyone wanted to know. And Gashu, he would never forget her again. A few weeks after the gala, Gashu's company was struggling badly. Clients had left. His top staff had joined competitors, and every new move he tried failed. Investors were worried. Meetings were tense. Gashu kept pretending he had it under control, but inside, he knew he was losing grip. Then came the shock. A message arrived. His company had a new major investor. A surprise buyer had taken over the majority of the shares. Gashu rushed to the boardroom, confused and panicked. Who would do this? Who had that kind of power? Then the door opened, and in walked Asira. This time she wasn't holding a cardboard box. She wasn't the woman crying at her desk. She was dressed in power, standing tall, with eyes full of calm fire. Right behind her walked Nair, confident and composed, carrying a leather folder. She wasn't just an employee anymore. She was now the chief strategy officer of Rise. Gashu stood frozen. What is this? He asked, his voice cracking. Asira didn't raise her voice. She just walked to the head of the table and took her seat. Rise has acquired majority control of this company, she said. Effective immediately. All major decisions will go through us. Gashu stared at her, stunned. You can't be serious. I'm always serious, Asira replied. He looked at Nare, as if hoping for some kind of help. But Nare only returned a calm, professional nod. There was no emotion, no revenge, just business. Gashu's voice dropped. Why are you doing this? Asira leaned forward slightly. Because I know what it feels like to be pushed out. I know how it feels when someone laughs at your pain, in public, like it's entertainment. You taught me that. He was silent. No smirk, no words. She continued. This isn't revenge. It's a lesson. You lost your way, Gashu. You led with ego. You dismissed people who had value. And now you've lost your company not because of me, but because of you. The room was silent. Gashu lowered his head. Asira stood up. You'll remain in an advisory role for now, she said. We don't believe in throwing people out the way you did. But know this, we build differently, with respect, with purpose. She turned and walked out, Nair right beside her. As they stepped into the hallway, Nair asked softly, was that the closure you needed? Asira smiled. It wasn't closure. It was a reminder that the ones they overlook often rise the highest. And with that, she walked away, not as the girl they once pushed aside, but as the woman who now owned the room. The news spread quickly inside the company. Gashu was no longer in charge. He had been moved to an advisory role, with no real power. Some employees were shocked, others just nodded quietly. They had seen the change coming. Still, no one expected it to happen so fast. Gashu sat alone in his old office, the same one where he once stood tall and confident, giving orders and laughing loudly. Now, the room felt different, quiet, cold. The desk didn't feel like his anymore. Then the door opened. Asira stepped in, calm and steady. She didn't need to speak loudly. Her presence alone filled the space. She walked over and stood across from him, no longer the woman he once mocked, but the leader he couldn't ignore. Gashu looked up at her. His eyes were tired, full of confusion and regret. He had seen everything crash around him. Clients, reputation, confidence. And now, here she was. The woman who had once walked out in tears, now standing in power. He tried to speak. Asira, please. I know I made mistakes. I didn't think things would go this way. She didn't say anything yet. She just listened. I've lost everything, he continued. This company, my team, my respect. I was wrong. I admit that. Just don't push me out completely. I'm asking for a chance to fix things. Asira looked at him carefully. Her face was calm, but her eyes were firm. You didn't just fire me, Gashu, she said softly. You humiliated me. You laughed when I was hurting. And you did it in front of everyone. You thought my silence meant weakness. He stayed quiet, his head lowered. She stepped closer. But I took that pain, and I turned it into purpose. I built something with people who were also ignored. I didn't destroy you. You did that to yourself. I just gave your people a better choice. He looked at her again, searching for pity, but there was none. That's the difference between us, she said. You used power to hurt. I used pain to build. He nodded slowly, broken. I understand. You'll stay on, she added, as an advisor, not because I owe you anything, but because people still look to you. Use that to do something better, if you can. Then she turned to leave, but before she stepped out, she paused at the door. This isn't revenge, Gashu. It's a reminder that every action matters, even a laugh. And with that, she walked away. No anger, no hate, just strength, the kind that comes from rising after being torn down. Gashu sat there, alone. The final meeting had ended, and nothing would ever be the same. The sky was soft with evening light as Asira stood on the rooftop of the Root-Rise building. The wind brushed gently against her face, and the city lights below shimmered like stars. It was quiet up there, far away from the noise of meetings, deals, and old memories. She looked out, calm and content, her hands resting on the edge as she breathed in the air of peace. It had been a long journey, from the day she walked out of her old job with a box in her hands, heartbroken and humiliated, to this very moment. She had been through pain, doubt, and silence, but she didn't let those things break her. She let them build her. This rooftop wasn't just a place. It was a symbol. She wasn't standing here to celebrate someone else's fall. She was standing here because she chose to rise, her own way. Behind her, the door opened. Nair walked in, holding 2 cups of coffee. She had grown so much too, once overlooked, now the powerful and respected Chief Strategy Officer. She walked over with a soft smile and handed Asira the coffee. He finally cleared out his desk, Nair said gently. There was no joy in her voice, no mockery, just a simple statement. Asira took the cup, paused for a moment, and looked out at the skyline again. She didn't smile because someone was gone. She smiled because of what they had built. She turned to Nair and said just 5 quiet words. Let's build bigger, she whispered. That was it. No long speeches, no revenge, no looking back. Because Asira knew something many people don't learn in a lifetime. True power is not about destroying what hurt you. It's about growing beyond it. Root-Rise was just the beginning. The world was watching now. But Asira, she was already planning the next move. One step at a time, one rise at a time, without regret. If this story gave you chills, imagine what your rise could look like. Tag someone who's been doubted, overlooked, or laughed at, and remind them your comeback will be louder than their mockery. Double tap if you believe in turning pain into power. Share this to inspire someone who's about to give up. Save this as a reminder. Quiet storms still shake the world.